Hey everyone, today I'm going to teach you how to paint a glass of wine. This is so incredibly simple. I'm going to show you how to draw it, how to paint it, and it shouldn't take too long, just a few simple steps. So grab all your supplies. I'm really just using two colors, Alizarin Crimson and Paynes Gray. So let's go ahead and get started. So grab your paper. This is really super simple. I'm going to show you exactly how to go through each one of these steps. And let me grab my paper right here. So the first thing that you're going to want to do to draw your glass of wine is grab your pencil. If you have a kneaded eraser, that's super handy because then what you can do is kind of blot your drawing after you're done, but not necessary for this quick little lesson. So grab your paper. There are just 3 simple steps. So when you're drawing a glass of wine, there are essentially 3 ovals that you're going to draw to create that glass of wine and make it look sort of realistic. So before we do anything, you want to have 2 parallel lines, 2 vertical parallel lines. That's going to kind of contain each one of those ovals so that when we create our wine glass and the wine within the glass, it makes it look realistic. So start with those vertical lines, and they don't have to be perfect. You can do these restating lines where they're just kind of jagged and loose, or you could even use a ruler if you wanted to, if you like to be precise. So that was step number 1. First part of step number 1, we have our 2 parallel lines. Now we're going to draw these 3 ovals, and each oval gets a little bit bigger because we can see more of it as we look at that actual wine glass. So if you were looking at this glass, you can tell that this is closer to eye level because it's smaller. And then as you get above whatever you're drawing that's cylindrical, it would get a little bit wider and you would see more. So you can make each one of these ovals just a tiny bit bigger than the last. So the top one is the top of your wine glass. You could do something like this just to get you started. You just want to make sure that you have curves on the sides of that oval. So that's number 1. My second one will be a little bit bigger. Okay, and then the bottom one is going to actually touch the bottom edges right here. That one should be the tallest. And this is pencil, so you can always fix it later on. Okay, so step number 1, draw your 2 parallel lines, draw your 3 ovals. Now we're going to move on to step number 2, where we actually make it look more like a wine glass. So we're going to create just this curved piece. We're going to create the stem, and then we'll move on to 3, where we erase all of our lines and kind of adjust anything that looks off. So now I'm going to make you can either start with the stem. Before I show you that, you could start with the stem to kind of create that base. Okay, and then do the curves at the bottom of your glass, but I don't know, I just tend to always do the curve of this first and then create the stem. So just 2 curved lines, and you can see that I'm kind of slowly bringing it towards the center. And then when you do the stem, so we can edit this in step number 3, but it's even better if you do it in step number 2, where you kind of create this triangle shape at the base of the wine glass where it meets the stem. So you want to kind of bring it in a little bit like this, and then do your vertical lines, and then the same thing at the base, so it kind of flares out. Okay, so it's already looking a lot like a wine glass, and so all I'm going to do is I'm going to erase these lines that I don't need anymore. And I can touch anything up that looks a little funny once I erase those lines. And you also, so other than those vertical lines that I erased, you want to make sure that you erase this line too, because even though it's glass, we don't want to see that drawing line. Okay, cool. So that is how to draw a wine glass. You can practice this a few times before painting, or you can just jump right in. You could even just paint like this too if you wanted, paint directly. Okay, so now that we're done with drawing our wine glass, we're going to paint it using just 2 colors. So to create the wine glass, there's also just 3 simple steps, and we're using Alizarin Crimson, which is kind of a cool red, and also Paynes Gray. Paynes Gray is a bluish almost like a bluish black. Just makes your colors not so flat. So I'm just working, I'm activating some of my Alizarin Crimson. I'm gonna grab just a tiny bit of Paynes Gray, and I'm gonna mix it in my tray so it gives it that kind of wine color. So just to kind of show you what that should look like, you can always grab a small piece of paper so you can do a swatch to see how your color is turning out. If you want it more red, maybe it's not that deep of a wine, you can add more red, or that Alizarin Crimson, just to show you the differences. I kind of like somewhere between here and here. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna do with that color that we mixed up Alizarin Crimson and Paynes Gray. We're gonna add a really light layer to our wine glass. But as you can see in my example, in that first step, we're leaving a highlight. So we're actually not going to paint where this little white highlight is. So do your best. If it's too difficult to work around that white space without drawing it, then go ahead and you can draw with a pencil and just really lightly on that right hand side. So we're imagining that there's a highlight on the right and then the shadows on the left. So I'm going to take that color that I just mixed up, making sure my brush is wet. I'm going to test out the color just to make sure that it's not too dark, because this is your first layer that we're going to let dry. We're actually using a glazing technique where we paint on top with 2 layers, so that's pretty good. Now I'm going to paint this whole base of where the wine will go, and except for that highlight. So first I'm going to do kind of a quick little highlight shape right here, dab my brush in the water just so I have enough flow in my brush. And I'm going to stop short of my pencil line when I fill that in. That's going to help later on make it look like glass. So stop short of your pencil line when you're filling this in. And you're even filling in that top part too. Okay, step number 1 is done. While that's drying, you can mix up a slightly darker color for your step number 2. Step number 2 is adding a glazing layer. So we're going to paint a darker side to create a shadow, make it look kind of deep, rich, and realistic. But we need to wait for this to dry. Okay, so let's mix that color up while that's drying. So just the same exact colors, just more concentrated paint. And I'll also use, whoa, that got really dark. Let's test it. Let's see how dark that is. Wow. Okay, too dark. So I'm gonna grab a little bit more of that Alizarin Crimson. So if this happens to you and it starts to look purpley, it's only because Paynes Gray has that blue in it. So the more Paynes Gray you put in it, the more bluish it adds to that purple. Or I mean, to your Alizarin Crimson. Okay, that's pretty good, but the key to this second layer is that you don't want it to be too watery. So if you use your brush and you lift it and there's a, a big watery streak, then you want to use up some of that paint. Okay, so once this is dry, and you want to take a look here, sometimes you can feel the back of your paper to see if it's totally dry, if it's cool, instead of touching the surface, but that looks good. What I'm aiming for is this section right here and this section right here. The tricky part is to make it, you want to blend that out so it looks lighter as it gets closer to that highlight. Now, one way to do this is to kind of start in the middle and push it to the left, or you can paint a small area on the left and then dry your brush out and wiggle it to the right. So I will show you just the first step of this. Oh, and then the other thing too I was going to say is leave a little sliver of light in between those 2 sections where we can see the top of that wine and where we see it in the actual glass itself. So I kind of messed that up a little bit, but you'll still see it. So I'm painting that section. I'm going to paint a little bit here so it shows that there's a shadow on the base. And I'm going to push some of that. See how if I push, kind of press down, it'll lift and move that paint to that left hand side. And if I wash my brush out, if I don't like those hard edges, with just a slightly damp brush, I can push that paint and wiggle that line And now I have this nice gradient. So that is step number 2. So step number 1 was your first layer where you painted it with your Alizarin Crimson and Paynes Gray. You let that dry. The second layer is that darker layer where we're using the glazing method. And now we're gonna let that dry. The final step in this whole entire process, look at how easy this was. We almost have an entire wine glass, is to do the glass portion. Now, the glass is really just an outline that's kind of broken up. So you can see, while this is drying, I'll explain. So not all of my lines are perfectly layered on top of that pencil. See how there's some spaces here where I've kind of left it open? That is the key to making this look like it's glass, because it looks like maybe that's a highlight. See how that looks like it's continued all the way up through? That's what we're gonna do with this piece too. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is mix up, I don't even really need to mix it up, but I'm gonna get that color for my glass by just using some watered down Paynes Gray. So I'm gonna wash my brush out. I'm going to move it over here because I think this is out of the range of the video. And what I'm looking for with my Paynes Gray, you don't want it to be that dark. Then it'll look too cartoony. So somewhere between this, you can just use some of it up on your brush until it looks thin and light. I'm going to even water it down even more. And if it's too gray, here's another trick. You can add a little bit of ultramarine blue to it. It won't look so flat. Okay, so this is really the kind of gray that I'm going for. That's just watered down Paynes Gray. Now, I'm gonna avoid the area where it's drying, and I'm gonna get started on the rest of the glass. You just don't wanna touch the wet part. I'm gonna get some of that watered down Paynes Gray, and I'm gonna start by painting just some of the outlines, and I'm not going to have this touch the actual wine in the glass. So remember, this is kind of like a halo outline. So I'm really just outlining my pencil. And if my pencil touches the wine, I'm gonna actually go a little bit beyond the pencil. Okay. And we'll do a little on the rim. See how most of these lines don't really touch. And then since the left-hand side is our shadowed side, we're at the top of the stem, I'm gonna add this corner shadow. And then at the bottom right, I'm gonna do it on that side too, and it's gonna make it look kind of realistic. And if your gray starts to get too light, just don't even wash your brush out, just dab just a teeny tiny part of tip of your brush into that water. You do kind of a halo line around the bottom to make it look like that bottom of the glass is thick. And some of these little lines. That's basically it. And these are just maybe some shadows or highlights. This is gonna go around that. Okay, that's basically all you need. There's your wine glass. So super simple. I hope you enjoyed this. I love creating lessons that are easy and straightforward. So if you enjoyed painting this little wine glass today, definitely subscribe for more fun and easy tutorials. I'll see you next time.